All right, so we're going to talk about just mixing the main house mix, which we'll typically do on a Sunday morning. Here you see our faders with the channel numbers labeled here, if I could talk, 1 through 24. Typically, we're only going to be using 1 through either 17 or 18, depending on if we have something that we need to put in channel 18. But the faders is going to be your main volume control. So if one of the vocalists is not quite loud enough, I can just bump them up. Or if they're too loud, you can pull them down. That's typically going to be how you control the volume in the auditorium when you're running sound. You'll see that you have a U, which is going to be the ideal location for where the fader should be. And around U, you're going to go up to plus 10 dB and minus 10 dB. But then outside that range, you see the numbers get a lot closer together, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. So that means if you have a lot of incoming signal and you just turn it up a little bit, this is going to be a huge difference in sound. So that's why you want it to be at U. So you can kind of give a fine grain adjustment into the sound level. Now, what happens if the incoming sound is way too loud? Well, that's why we have these gain knobs up here. You can think of it as the line coming in. It first goes through this gain knob, and this will adjust the level of sound coming into the board itself. And then as it runs through the board, you can think of the fader as the level actually going out to the board. So if we have way too much sound coming in, then our fader is probably going to have to be like way down here, because we're just overloading the board with sound. Now on the other hand, if the gain knob is way down here, even if our fader's all the way up, we're probably not going to hear it. So what we need to do is just make sure your gain knob is at an ideal location so that your fader is at U. Now obviously you can't quite always have it in a perfect world and everything be at U, but the closer you are, the better. So that's why occasionally it may be a good idea to kind of equalize your faders and then kind of set everything at U. Now the problem with using the gain knobs, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is that not only does it adjust the level of the house mix that you're going to hear out here, but it's also going to adjust the level of the auxes. So it's not a good idea to only mix by the gain knob. It's kind of like a last resort. So primarily just use the faders. Now, those are the normal faders. We have our subgroups over here. Now what are the subgroups? So you see this subgroup here. Subgroup 1 is drums, the drum subgroup. So maybe it's the case that the band sounds pretty good and their level is decent, but there's just way too much drums. It's way too loud. So instead of just turning down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, which are all the drums, I can just turn down this drum subgroup. And so it makes it a little bit easier to do that. And same with band. The band subgroup are channels 9 through 18, with the exception, well, that's not quite right, but the band subgroup would be bass, keys, guitars, acoustic guitars, and that's pretty much it. So I guess it's just 9 through 14 would be the band subgroup. And then you have your vocal subgroup, which would be Zach vocal and secondary vocal. And then subgroup 4 is speaking mics, which is really just only Joe. So that subgroup is really kind of pointless. But I guess if you did have more people just talking, then you could put them in that subgroup.